Hi mathematicians, it's Miss Johnson. Today we're going to be taking some notes. So let's go ahead and get your notes out and write today's date. And then our title for our notes is going to be Ordering Decimals. So you've learned about decimals in previous grade levels. You learned that they are parts of wholes. And today we're going to be looking at putting those in order, from least to greatest or greatest to least. But before we do that, I'm wondering if you've ever heard this story before. There's a little girl, and she had gotten $1 for doing her chores. She was so excited about her $1. Well, her brother was excited about her $1 too. He came in and he said, "Hey, you only have $1. But I have 2 quarters. Do you want to trade?" Well, the little girl's excited because all she had to do was give her brother $1 and then she'd get 2 quarters back. So she was like, "Okay, I'll trade." So the brother took the $1 and she had 2 quarters. She was so excited. She had 2 quarters instead of just 1. My brother came back a little bit later and he said, "Hey, I have 3 dimes. Do you want to trade?" Well, anybody knows that 3 is bigger than 2. So she said, "Yeah, let's trade." She thought, man, my brother doesn't know what he's doing. She was so happy with her 3 dimes. Brother came back a little bit later and he said, "Hey, let's trade one more time." She was like, "Really? Is he really going to trade me again?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to trade again. Look, I have 5 pennies. Let's trade." She was like, "Yeah, 5 is better than 3. So they traded. Later, her mom asked her about her $1. And mom was not very happy with brother, because sister ended up trading a whole $1 for just 5 pennies. So what was the sister's mistake? What was the sister's mistake? Yeah, these coins and this money does not have the same value, right? Doesn't have the same value. So even though this is just 1, it has a greater value than 5 of these or 3 of these or 2 of these, right? So when we're talking about decimals, we're kind of talking about the same thing. We're talking about the value that different place values have. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm sure you have seen one of these before. It's a place value chart. So if we start with the $1, right, the $1, it has the biggest biggest value out of all those others, right? It's a 1. It's a whole $1, so we would put 1 in the ones place. The 50 cents, it has 0 ones, and then it has 5 tenths, right? We could even say it has 50 hundredths because it's 50 cents, right? Okay. And then the 3 dimes is 30 cents. So again, that's 0 ones and 3 tenths. And then the 5 pennies. The 5 pennies are 5 hundredths, right? So it's 0 ones, it's 0 tenths, and it's only 5 hundredths. The coins have different value. These place values have different values, right? So it's the same kind of thought process. When we're dealing with our decimals, we have to think about, okay, well, what has the greatest place value? So as we go from left to right, the place values get smaller. As you go from right to left, the place values get bigger. Okay, so just like if I had a $10 bill and I put a 1 and a 0, the $10 bill would have a greater value, right? So as we go right to left. So if we're starting here at the decimal, the tenths has a bigger place value than the hundredths. So it's worth more, right? It has more than the hundredths, more than the thousands, okay? So when we have to compare our place value with decimals, a lot of times we fill in, especially when we're talking about money, right? This is the way we write money, and we put our little dollar signs here in the front, right? And so we make all those have the same place value. You can see very easily and very quickly that the dollar is worth more than the 50 cents, and the 50 cents is worth more than the 30 cents, and the 30 cents is worth more than the 5 pennies, the 5 cents. So the little girl's mistake was she didn't know the value. She didn't think about she didn't know about the place value. So today we're going to take some notes on different ways. There's 2 ways actually that we can compare decimals. And they all start the same way. The first thing that we're going to do, and we're going to make like a little flow chart here on our for our notes. So the first thing that we're always going to do is we're going to organize our values or our numbers. So we're going to organize the values or the numbers vertically. Do you know what vertical means? So vertically is just up and down, okay? From top to bottom, if you want to say, okay? So this is our first thing we're going to do. We're going to put a box around it. That's the first thing we're going to do. And how do we do that? How do we organize vertically? So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to line up the decimals. And I'm going to do an example in a minute, don't worry. Line up the decimals. And in doing so, by lining up the decimals, what we're actually doing is we're lining up our place value. And that's what's so important in order to be able to compare. Now from this point, there's actually 2 different ways you can take it. Okay? There's 2 different ways you can take it. We can add unnecessary zeros. To make all the numbers have the same value. And that's what I did here. Okay, so here our numbers are organized vertically. That lines up our place value. Okay, I added unnecessary zeros here so that they would all have the hundredths value. Okay, so that's what that means. We'll put a box around this. And then after we do that, we compare the values. So we just look at the whole value. So like we would just look $1, 50 cents, 30 cents, 5 cents, or 1, 50 hundredths, 30 hundredths, 5 hundredths. Okay, we compare the values. And then the last thing we would do is we would rewrite it. We would rewrite the numbers as we go in order from greatest to least or least to greatest, depending on what our question is asking us. Okay, let's pick this up a little bit. So I'm going to put that down here at the bottom in the middle, because that's the last thing we do for both ways. Okay, so we rewrite the numbers or values, and we're going to do this as we go. As we're comparing, we're going to do that. So we do that as we go in order from, and it's going to ask you one of 2 ways: least to greatest or greatest to least. There's different ways that they can ask you to do that. Sometimes they just straight up ask you like that, and sometimes they ask you in different ways. Like they might say coldest to warmest, thinnest to thickest. But essentially, they're asking you least to greatest or greatest to least. Okay, so that's one way. You add unnecessary zeros. Another way is you can start by comparing. You don't add the unnecessary zeros, you leave them off, and you start with comparing the greatest place value. You compare starting at the largest place value. One way is not better than the other. You have to pick the way that you like, that you think is easiest for you. So you compare starting at the largest place value. Okay? So if these were our numbers, pretend the pink ones aren't there. So our largest place value is 1. So if we're putting in order from greatest to least, 1 is the largest place value. So we start there with 1. So I know that's the biggest number, 1. Okay? Then let's just say if place value is equal, for example, we have 1, 2, 3 zeros here. So these three numbers have the same value in the largest place value. So that means we have to go to the next largest place value, which is the tenths, and we compare the tenths next. We have a 5, 3, and 0. So what would the greatest value be? It would be the 5. So this would be the next value. Okay? So if the place value is equal, compare the next greatest place value. Okay? And then put a box around that. And then you rewrite the numbers as you go in order from least to greatest, or greatest to least. Okay, and we're going to do some examples with that. So if you haven't finished writing the notes, go ahead and pause the video and finish writing your notes, and then unpause it when you're finished, and we're going to be doing a couple of examples. Okay? All right. Let's hope I don't make this too wobbly. All right, there we go. Okay, switch up. All right, so some examples. All right, we're going to put these in order from greatest to least. You can go ahead and put the date if you want, but these are kind of a continuation of the previous notes. So, place in order from greatest to least. Okay. So our values, excuse me, are going to be 1 and 2/10, 40 5/100, 1 and 54 thousandths, 5/10, and 385 thousandths. Okay. One thing that I always tell my students to do is pay attention to what order they're asking you to put it in. And I always tell my students to write it big. So they're asking us to underline it and then write it big. So they're asking us to put it in greatest to least. So I'm going to write G to L on the side. And I'm going to write it big so that I can pay attention, so that I can remember, oh yeah, it's asking me to put it in order from greatest to least. Okay, that's important because our brains that fast can forget what order we're supposed to be putting it in. Okay, and we don't want to get it wrong, get our question wrong because we put it in the wrong order. All right, I don't know how many times I've seen kids put numbers in the right order, but the question asks greatest to least, but they put them in order from least to greatest. Okay, so it's just one way to help prevent that mistake. So write it real big on the side. All right, now our first step is to organize the values vertically or up and down. Okay, so what I do is I count my numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I literally just put 5 decimals. Notice I'm putting the decimals on the lines, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I surround my numbers with it. This helps me keep it very organized, okay? Because we're definitely not going to have this nice little printed place value sheet with us every time we need to do this, right? So we have to be organized ourselves and keep our math organized, okay? So there's my decimal. I had a 1 in front and a 2 in the back, a 0 in the front of the decimal in the ones place, and then 45. Notice I am trying to keep my numbers lined up as well. That just makes everything more organized, and it's going to make it easier. Okay? The neater you can do this, the better off you're going to be. Okay? So remember we talked about there's 2 ways to do this. One way, you can add your unnecessary zeros to make everything the same place value. The second way was to start at the largest place value and then work your way in, right? So we're going to do it that way first, and then I'll add the unnecessary zeros and show you that it ends up being the same. Okay, so greatest to least. My greatest place value is my 1s, and the greatest value there is they both have a 1. So then I'm going to go I'm just looking at this one and this one. So I'm going to go to the next place value, which is tenths. This one has 2 tenths. This one has 0 tenths. So which one's greater, 2 tenths or 0 tenths? Yeah, 2 tenths is greater. Okay, so that means this number is bigger. Okay, this would be like having $1.20, and this one, we don't have a value that's smaller than a penny, so this one would be like $1.05, right? So our 1 and 2 tenths is the biggest, and then our 1 and 54 thousandths is next. It doesn't matter that this one has more numbers behind it. Okay, that doesn't matter. Tenths is a larger place value than hundredths or thousandths, so 2 tenths is bigger than 0 tenths. Okay, now I'm done with my 1s. Now I go back to my largest place value, which is the 1s, and I have a 0, 0, and a 0. So I have 3 numbers that I'm comparing now. So I'm going to go next to the next biggest place value, which is tenths. So I have 4, 5, and 3. So I'm putting in order from greatest to least. So my biggest place value is the 5. So 5 tenths would go next. Okay, so that one's gone. Then I have a 4 and a 3, which is bigger. 4 tenths is bigger than 3 tenths. So my next value, my next greatest would be 45 hundredths. And then our last would be 385 thousandths. Okay. So if you chose to do your unnecessary zeros, then you would find your largest place value. It's actually your smallest place value because you're behind the decimals, but anyway. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, so everything's in the thousandths. So I would make all of these values go to thousandths. Okay. So 1 and 200 thousandths is bigger than 1 and 54 thousandths. And then 500 thousandths is bigger than 450 thousandths. And 450 thousandths is bigger than 385 thousandths. Okay. Notice, either way, if I put the zeros or I don't, you end up with the same order. Most people like to do it this way. Most people like to put the unnecessary zeros there and compare the numbers as a whole. Okay, most people like to do it that way. You choose which way you like best. It doesn't matter. When you rewrite your decimals, though, don't put those extra zeros in there, those unnecessary zeros. Write the values as they were originally written. Okay? All right, now let's practice. with a least to greatest. Oh, misspelled from. Least to, goodness gracious, I'm messing up a lot today. Greatest. Okay. So our values are going to be 2 and 400ths, 6/10ths, 1 and 3,000ths, 2 and 31,000ths, 5300ths, and 1 and 300ths. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values. So our first step, remember, is to organize our numbers vertically. So I'm going to put 6 decimals, and then I can put my, remember, the reason we just do it this way is just to keep ourselves organized. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Organized and neat. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. So put 6 decimals right in a line. And then I wrap my numbers around those decimals. So 2 is in the front, and then 400ths behind. 6/10ths. Remember, as you're writing your numbers, concentrate on keeping your numbers neat and in line. Okay? Okay? And then we're just going to compare them now. Okay, if you want to go ahead and put the unnecessary zeros, go ahead. If you want to just look at your greatest place values and work that way, either way, I'm going to show both, right? Okay, so I'm putting in order from least to greatest. I forgot to do my real big L to G. Sorry, I just like writing those letters in cursive. I think they look pretty, right? So I'm going to write real big, least to greatest, so I can remind myself what order I'm putting them in. Okay, so when I look at my biggest place value, that's my ones. And I think, okay, I'm putting it in order from least to greatest, so the least value here is 0. So I'm going to look at this value and this value. Now there's a lot of values here, so sometimes it makes it easier to focus if we circle. Or you can even pull it out further and just do them by themselves. Like so. Doesn't matter. Whatever's easiest for you. Okay, if this is too many numbers, then pull them out and look at them by themselves. Okay? Alright, so 0 is the same, so I go to my next largest place value is 6/10ths and 5/10ths. And I'm putting from least to greatest, so my least value is at 6 or 5. It's 5, so my smallest value here is going to be 5300ths. And then 6/10ths. Then I'm going to look at the ones. Well, I'll go back to my largest place value, right? And I have a 2, a 1, a 2, and a 1 left. So least to greatest, so the least value is the ones. So I'm only going to look at this value and this value. And again, you can pull them out and look at them separate if that's too many numbers. Just look at those two. So I have 0/10ths, 0/10ths. So I have a ones, or my ones values is the same, my tenths values is the same. So that means I need to go to the next place value, which is hundredths. And I have 0/100ths and 300ths. Remind yourself, what are you putting in order from least to greatest? So I need the least value. So the least value is the 0. So 1 and 3,000ths will go next, because 0 is less than 3. And then 1 and 300ths. Then I go back to my largest place value, which is the ones, and I have a 2 and a 2. Same value, so I go to my next largest place value. I have a 0 and a 0. And then that's the same, so I go to my next, which is 4 and 3. And I'm putting the least to greatest, so which one's the smallest? The least, the 3. So 2, 0, 2 and 31 thousandths. And then last, I'm so sorry I ran out of room here, is 2 and 4 hundredths. Okay? All right, if we put our unnecessary zeros, so thousandths is the place value we want all of these to be in, so tenths, hundredths, thousands, tenths, hundreds, thousands, tenths, hundredths, thousands, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay, so we look, we're putting least to greatest. So I think 2 and 40 thousandths, 600 thousandths, 1 and 3 thousandths, 2 and 31 thousandths, 530 thousandths, or 1 and 30 thousandths. Okay, so 530 is smaller than all of these other numbers, right? So that's going to be first. So 530 is the smallest, then 600, and then 1030 smaller, or 1 and 30 thousandths, or 1 and 3 thousandths. So 3 thousandths is smaller, so that one goes next. 30 thousandths, 1 and 30 thousandths would go next. And then 2 and 40 thousandths, or 2 and 31 thousandths. Which one's smaller? 2 and 1 and 31 thousandths, and then the last would be 2 and 40 thousandths. Remember, we took those zeros off when we rewrote it. Okay? So that's how you order decimals from least to greatest. All right, the next video we're going to look at is going to have us putting numbers in order, the decimals in order, in a word situation, a word problem situation. Okay? All right, just real quick, we're going to do a lesson reflection about what we learned today. So think about the processes that you learned today. And then you're going to write, you should have room here to write your lesson reflection. Okay, so you can write, what did you learn, about what you learned. You can also write, you learned 2 ways to order your decimals. Which way did you like better and why? Okay. Right, and there might be a different reflection that your teacher wants you to do. So whatever reflection your teacher wants you to do will be fine as well. Okay? All right, I hope you'll have a great day.